in times of crisis, which will be dedicated to deciphering the role, the aims, and challenges of think tanks. So thank you very much all for tuning in. This is a topic of great importance as in an unstable world, sort of marked by constant shifts, both in geopolitical and economic terms, evolving forms of insecurity and the fragmentation, sometimes of multilateralism under the pressure exerted by crisis. Think tanks' complementary skills, areas of focus, and expertise have proved to be crucial in improving the quality of public debate by analyzing unfolding changes and providing concrete and tangible policy recommendations. And we've seen this in the wake of previous crises, including the 2008 global financial crisis. There has been a growing demand for policy expertise to relaunch and redesign the economy, which has constituted a turning point for the reinforcement of the prime role of think tanks in the global production of knowledge. And similarly with the COVID-19 pandemic, which has manifested sort of novel and exacerbated old health, social, political, and economic issues that threaten to reverse hard-won progress in securing peace and stability and in sustaining human development. Think tanks have sort of been at the forefront of an effort to inform the public, accompany decision makers, and disseminate knowledge. So today, to further elaborate on the role of think tanks in times of crisis, we have three panelists who have graciously accepted to share their insights and analysis of the role played by think tanks during such exceptional times. We have today with us Mrs. Jessica de Alba, which is a research associate at the Mexican Council on Foreign Relations. We have Ambassador Mohamed Lilishki, who is a senior fellow at the Policy Center for the New South, and Dr. Roba Sharamo, who's a commissioner at the Institute for Security Studies. So thank you all again for accepting to participate to this session, which I am sure will be a very stimulating and fruitful debate. Following first a structured discussion, we will hold a 10-minute questions and answers session near the end of the webinar. So I truly highly welcome our audience to ask throughout the session any questions they might have, and we will make sure to address these by the end. So to start the conversation, I think we might need to first sort of highlight the adjustments that think tanks need to undergo in order to effectively play a role in times of crisis. As we've seen, the changes induced by the COVID-19 pandemic have significantly altered national, regional, and international political, as well as economic dynamics, reshaping sort of the outlook of the post-COVID global order. So how can think tanks reorganize their research agendas to match these evolving realities in times of crisis without necessarily losing sight of key underlying priorities that continue to influence the wider context? And how can think tanks in the global South in particular bring attention to the new issues commonly faced, such as with regards to vaccine access and economic recovery? I'm going to invite you first, Mrs. Jessica de Alba, to share your thoughts, and then Dr. Roba Sharamo, followed by Ambassador Mohamed Lilishki, will be invited to voice their thoughts as well. So Mrs. Jessica, the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here. Thank you to the Policy Center for the New South for this invitation. So addressing the question on how we can reorganize our research agendas to match the new realities in time of crisis, we have to say that, of course, a crisis or shock like COVID-19 shifts and refocuses the public agenda overnight. So there is absolutely nothing else on the news, and think tanks like us should resist the temptation to give up our agendas altogether in favor of the visibility that the crisis could give us. So, because if we do, we risk having to start from scratch when the crisis is over. Now, instead, what we need to do is to try to find ways to connect to the crisis by making use of our own agendas and expertise. For instance, the Mexican Foreign Relations, where I am an associate of, think tank, well, we have been organizing different webinars that have to do with different connections with think tanks with different regions of the world. But along with that, we have not been giving up on discussing important themes like, for instance, US elections or the Mexico-US relation or what's happening with China and many other issues that are in the foreign arena. So we need to find how to connect with those crises and our agendas and expertise. For instance, public health sectors or energy, which is one of our topics along with foreign policy. So we can do this also quietly for preparing for when the crisis is over, because the public and our key audiences will surely want to learn more about the effect on the crisis that had on the environment or the state of public services or the overall regional relations. So of course, our roles range from setting the policy agenda, from designing policy interventions, advocating for adoptions of certain policies, or monitoring the implementations of policies and evaluating those policies and programs for their impact and refinements. So while COVID-19 has come as a major disruption to the policy process in developing countries, much more than in developed ones, it has also represented a major challenge for think tanks' continued contribution and existence. We have to see this as an opportunity because even though we have several challenges, well, we also need to reinvent ourselves. For instance, how we determine our research agenda, how we look for finance or additional financing, because this is one of the key issues for think tanks, the funding, which is going to be challenging in those times of hardship that we are experiencing. I think I'll leave it here for now.
Many thanks, Mrs. Jessica Dialba, for sharing those very rich insights on, indeed, the need to sort of maintain equilibrium between structural and more sort of adjusted research agendas. I'm going to now turn to Dr. Roba Sharamo to further voice your thoughts as well. I think Dr. Roba has been disconnected. So while waiting for him to rejoin the conversation, could I please ask you, Ambassador Mohamed Lilishki, to jump in and sort of answer the question? Thank you.
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm delighted to join this panel, and I cannot but agree with our partner, our friend Jessica, in terms of her comments. I think that the COVID-19 crisis, as an unprecedented and as an unpredictable crisis, took everybody by surprise. Government, society, corporations, and here there is absolutely no difference between developing and developed countries. So it was a very democratic crisis, if I can label it as such. The crisis revitalized and energized the role of the state. And this is one of the features and one of the impacts of this crisis, and it created legitimate expectation from the society and from individuals. The authority had to act swiftly and decisively, and here the think tanks had, as Jessica said, a real opportunity to get access to decision makers, to be much more heard and listened to by individuals, by civil society, by academia, by enterprises, by the other stakeholders. Think tanks had to act quickly because the government had to take a very quick decisions. And I think that the think tanks were compelled, were in an obligation to follow the movement and to mobilize their energy, to mobilize their resources in order to follow this phenomenon and to try to bring to the attention of the public analysis for a better understanding not only of the crisis and its implication, but also of the measures undertaken by the government so that there will be a smooth implementations of the preventive measures that have been adopted by the government. I think the very overwhelming character of the crisis not only took everybody by surprise, but reshuffled and shifted the agenda of the think tanks. We had to rush and to produce as quickly as possible on different aspects. And this is not like the crisis of 2007, 2008 with nature. This is a more comprehensive, this is a very holistic crisis. So in a certain way, I think that while treating the consequences and the impact of the COVID-19, we were almost covering all the other aspects, whether national, of social, economic, cultural dimensions, but also regional, sub-regional, and global. But as you said, we did not neglect, this emphasis was not to the detriment of other priorities that we have always had. For example, the Policy Center of the New South, who has an African DNA, has to follow the priorities of Africa in terms of peace and security and stability, the issue of the Sahel, for example, the conflict in Libya, we have to continue to pay attention because of the proximity, but because also of the impact of these situations on Africa in general. And I think that we would like to emphasize once again that this was an opportunity, and I think there was some kind of impulse for the actions, for the activities and we have not only to adjust, but think tanks have to be creative and innovative, because in this flow of news and analysis and even fake news, you had to distinguish yourself by being neutral, by being objective, by doing some analysis that will be attractive to the public and attractive to the decision maker. And in terms of opportunity, I think this crisis was an opportunity for those think tanks in the developing countries to demonstrate the value added that they can bring to the debates and the connection between civil society and the decision maker. And here I stop here, and because I saw that our friend Roba has joined, and we are eager to listen to him.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for those very rich insights as well, really highlighting the extent to which indeed think tanks have been compelled to participate in responding to the crisis, and so I view it as an opportunity to do so. I think Dr. Roba has troubles relogging, so we might have to sort of move into the next question while waiting for Dr. Roba to reconnect.
Miss Salma, may I suggest that whenever, at any time, when Roba comes back, we can interrupt, I think, our contribution and give him the opportunity to give his, and ask him maybe to share with us his comments on the 3 questions so that we can prevent any disturbance.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. That is a great suggestion indeed. So we will move then to the second question, and I will give the floor to Dr. Roba whenever he rejoins the discussion. So with regards to the second question, which really just builds on the first one, how can think tanks leverage their collective resources and intellectual capacities to further participate in global governance processes or regional, dependent on sort of the angle that we might want to adopt, and have a greater role in accompanying, influencing, or even shaping policy making, both in terms of responding to the multidimensional impacts of crises such as COVID-19 and helping build greater future resilience to similar crises. I'm gonna give you the floor, Ambassador Mohamed Welishki, to start first, and then you will be provided with an opportunity to voice your thoughts as well. This is Jessica De Alba. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Salma. I think that while governments have the primary responsibility to deal with short-term consequences of the virus and mobilize resources to meet the needs of the population, think tanks had the possibility to think in terms of long-term, because that's given the impact and the consequences of the crisis, it is absolutely justifiable that the government would immediately think about the necessary fixes, the short-term measures that they have to take in different areas, in economic, in social, in cultural, in how the education will continue, in how they have so many tasks, urgent tasks to deal with. And this enables the think tanks not only to follow the pace of the government in terms of sharing with them input, in sharing with them analysis, in sharing with them that the proposals and the suggestions that they can offer to the decision makers, but they had also to anticipate the post-COVID period and think in terms of not only short and immediate term, but also in terms of long term. I think partnerships and joint initiative between sub-regional, regional think tanks, but also transcontinental, for example, African and Latin American think tanks, have the merit to allow some kind of comparison how is our perception of the crisis? What are the policies that we'd recommend? And I think this offers in this comparison the possibility to draw lessons and from the experience of others and try to improve on whatever decisions are taken or to be taken. And it helps also identify the best practices between the different countries and the different ideas that have been advanced. In the same vein, I think that I think I'm going to stop here because I'm seeing Mr. Roba. I can continue after that, but I think the utmost priority will be given to Roba to make his comment.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Ambassador Luishki. Dr. Roba, if you will, you might sort of perhaps provide us with your thoughts and insights on both the first and second question so that we can sort of collect and really draw from your thoughts for both of these 2 questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. First, my apology because the internet is terrible today. So I've been moving around and you have been losing me also for some time. First, let me also really thank my intervention will build on the excellent one from Jessica and also Ambassador. I think overall, in time,
I think there might have been another issue in reaching Dr. Roba. So just in order to keep the flow and keep the momentum, perhaps Ambassador, you would like to re-pursue your intervention, and then we can move to Mrs. Jessica, and whenever Dr. Roba joins in again, we can again yield him the floor, not to miss out on any of your interventions. Thank you very much.
Well, I was addressing the usefulness of the think tanks to connect with international organizations, be it regional, sub-regional, or global international organization, but also with international corporations in order to contribute to marketing the innovative ideas and proposed actions that are suggested by think tanks. And I think as institutions who are enjoying proximity with civil society and the academia, I think that think tanks are in a position also to play the same roles like the non-governmental organizations. Diplomacy nowadays, foreign policy nowadays are not only limited to traditional actors, but I think more and more non-governmental organizations and think tanks are proving that they can bring some value added to the debate. They can convey the concerns of civil societies. They can bring another dimension to the debate that is going on in terms of global governance. How think tanks can do that? I think by being at the same time independent, objective, innovative, but also ethical, because we need some ethics in international relations. We need to show to the international organizations that international relations are not limited only to interstate interests and interstate interaction, but civil societies, women, youth have also some concerns, have some priorities that have to be more and more acted upon in international organizations. And I think that TTs in this context can, I mean, when I talk about TTs, I'm talking about think tanks, can bring some kind of value added to that. Let me add maybe two other elements. I think regular institutionalized and action-oriented interaction between think tanks of different regions, of different continents, have maybe to be, to take place on regular basis and focus on some important themes and topics, especially at the eve of some important international gathering and conferences. And finally, since we are talking about anticipating other crises, and trying to be more and more prospective. I think a network of early warning units within think tanks from different regions and from different continents would help anticipate new crises and develop prospective scenario to manage such a crisis.
Thank you very much for your contribution, sort of really identifying critical issues and highlighting the necessary criteria for think tanks to perform a critical role in governance. I think Dr. Roba has joined us in again. So Dr. Roba, please, the floor is all yours. Thank you very much.
First of all, my apology. I think the network is quite terrible. I don't know whether I should actually be allowed to turn off the camera and see if it can be much better.
I think the only way is that we all will come to you at Addis Ababa, and we will we will solve the issue.
So also strategic engagement and dialogue with donors. That's what think tanks were able to quickly do, and they were able to really leverage on that. Partnerships and also pooling resources together. Trying to also take on advocacy positions and driving certain points and critiquing what governments are doing, using the media and mobilizing, and also asking the tough questions that we don't normally ask. You know, things like COVID was more of a public health pandemic, and we were doing more things about human security. So we started to look at human security from a public health angle, investments in institutions, investments in research, investments in capacities. So this is what some of the things which the think tanks have done. I think it's also the strategic engagement and partnerships across think tanks, which have been spoken about, and those are some of the major things. Of course, the asking the tough questions and looking at where the governments are really investing. Are you putting more money in defense budgets, or are you putting more money in social developments, in colleges, in public health and sanitation, paying the health workers and all that? So those are some of the things that think tanks have done on this side, which we felt to be very useful, and challenging politicians and budget holders that are they really spending much, and also really turning the hit on corruption. I mean, there's a lot of, particularly this side of Africa, we have a lot of what we call COVID millionaires or billionaires. People have made a lot of money from the emergency procurement tenders. So asking and exposing this and having some sort of a transparency lens with which we look at some of these things are some of the lessons I have seen think tanks bringing out. And also really for there's an element of appreciation of think tanks using evidence-based research, policy engagement forums to be able to ventilate on some of these issues. I have also seen a little bit more the academics and academia speaking about some of the public health and governance issues or misgovernance issues. So those are some of the highlights I wanted to make. Have quite a bit disrupted by this internet, so I think my train of thought is not flowing, and I don't want to repeat what my colleagues have also said. So maybe I can stop here and then see what the other engagements I can also bring in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Roba. That was a very informational and insightful contribution. And we thank you very much. We wouldn't have missed that for anything in the world. Mrs. Jessica Dialba, please, the floor is yours. You can also sort of articulate your thoughts and let us know what you think.
Thank you very much. As just Roba was saying a minute ago, I just read recently that, for instance, EasyJet, I think it's a company in the UK, was about to give a super bonus to their executives and to the president while asking for government support. And this touches on what we need to do in, really analyzing what is happening and where the money is going. We need transparency and accountability. So for this, it's the role of think tanks is very, very important because, first of all, we need to highlight the speed and range of think tanks and research response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And with the crisis impacting nearly every policy area, there's plenty of opportunity for us to make smart connections to our research and expertise. So this EasyJet research was done by a UK think tank, and this is what we need to do. I mean, not only for just for the purpose of accountability, for any other purpose. So what is important is for think tanks to think deeply about the contribution we can best make by asking ourselves these three things. So where do we have the most influence or the biggest audience? What information or support do we need? On what resources like staff time, data, analysis networks, etc., do we have to deliver? And could we partner with others to do it better? So in times of crisis, our think tanks should reach out to other think tanks and seek to shape resources and collaborate. So when the crisis is systemic, it affects everyone and everyone will need help. So national, regional, and global networks should be activated to find common solutions to common problems. And this is not the time to see peers or competitors to go under or to go without asking for help. Now, the strength of a think tank community is directly linked to the strength of individual think tanks. So we can share our strategies and tactics to cope with the crisis. And similarly, also cross-referencing good work from other think tanks in the same country is a way of highlighting that this is an effort to share good policy research and not to advance a single institution. So for instance, we have been contributing, as I mentioned earlier, with a foreign policy community of Indonesia, organized with a global town hall around the world and around the clock, with several other think tanks participating. We have another coming webinar on the European Union and Latin America relations amid COVID-19 pandemic, or different Mexico and the Netherlands or the UK on Russia, or democracy, liberty, and addressing COVID in South Korea or China, the pandemics. So open or not reopen. And this is a global disease, as Ambassador Lulichi was saying. It's just a very democratic virus because it has affected everyone, but every country, but not every country has had the same responses for this, because the picture seems gloomier in the global south. There was a survey on think tanks and how would those be impacted about the crisis, and we find that 54% of Latin American think tankers consider that the crisis will have a significant effect on think tanks in their country. For instance, 48% from Africa, 44% from Asia, and 38% from Europe, and only 11% from the US and Canada thought the same. So this is possibly related to both availability of funding for think tanks and demand for their services in these regions. Now, while in the US, Canada, and Europe enjoy a strong think tank funding sector with both public and private funding available, most Asian, African, and Latin American think tanks rely on either foreign or public funding. So in Latin America, foreign funding for think tanks has been in rapid decrease for at least the last decade, and the crisis is surely reducing the availability of public funding. So as a result, 13% of respondents from Africa and Asia and 16% from Latin America expect the crisis to lead to the closure of or significant downsizing of think tanks. So this is something that we have to consider. We don't want to be consider at the extinction level. So this is why we need to urgently respond to COVID-19 crisis in our societies and constructive and relevant policy contributions. And we need to do this right now. So we need to demonstrate our relevance. This may not guarantee that institutions will stay around, but at least we can demonstrate the critical role that we play in improving decision-making at the time of crisis. And this is not isolated effort. This needs to be done by working with other think tanks as a natural response.
Thank you very much. It is indeed very important to highlight the need and perhaps even the urgency for cross-collaboration in order to sort of further highlight relevancy. Before moving to our final questions and answer session, which I again highly encourage the audience to sort of share the questions with us so that we can address them at the end of the session. I would like to sort of wrap up this conversation by discussing the obstacles that think tanks sort of face. So what do you think are the main challenges obstructing think tanks' contribution to global or regional, once again, governance during crisis? And how can they overcome these challenges and continue to source relevant and credible intellectual capital to multi-level audiences, especially amidst sort of growing contradictory information flows? I'm going to start perhaps with Dr. Roba, just to make sure that he can deliver his remarks. First, Dr. Roba, the floor is yours, and then I'm going to invite Ambassador Mohamed Relishki and Mrs. Jessica Dialba to follow suit. Dr. Roba, the floor is yours.
I actually lost you. Sorry, what do you want me to focus on?
Absolutely. So we've turned sort of to the obstacles that
Okay.
face.
Very good.
So sort of what are the main challenges obstructing their contribution, and how can they overcome these to continue to be relevant and credible sort of sources of intellectual capital?
Okay, thank you very much. I think one of the main things, one of course is resources, both institutional resources, communication infrastructures, that because we have all moved into webinars and important technologies like this. So some smaller think tanks may not have this capacity and capability to do that. The ability to also retain staff, the ability to have resources, financial resources to continue to float, because we will be competing for very limited donor funding. Most of the think tanks in the South are basically largely dependent on donor funding. So when the donor cuts come, actually the think tanks will be really affected. So I think that's one. So there is an element of adaptability and trying to demonstrate impact with the little that you have, so that you can actually try to shine in the pool in the eyes of the donors, so that at least you show that the relevance that you have and the resilience. A lot of cost-cutting measures that also needs to be undertaken. Unfortunately, maybe combining jobs for staff, or really outsourcing some that more for luxury that you can't really keep administrative staff sometimes. So those are the major things. And also looking at how to adapt under the recovery phase post-COVID. Of course, COVID is not gone yet. It's going to be with us. We never know how long it will take. So I think looking at having some sort of long-term planning to be able to be sustainable in this. And what major other thing is really to find a space in the donor circles that think tanks continues to be funding for think tanks continues to be a priority. Of course, in most of the African governments, the think tanks are not really funded. So how do you reach out maybe to private sector? How do you leverage and also become useful in terms of really supporting government, supporting regional economic communities or continental institutions that you actually be able to sustain yourself? I think the other is really finding a space also in the policy circles. Most of the times the think tanks are not utilized effectively in public governance by government. So how do you try to build that element of relevance and trying to really communicate well? I think being able to tell the story better, I think that can are some of the things that we need to be looking at. So, and it's a challenge because you might be really, if a donor is trying to decide whether to support a public health crisis or to fund a think tank, it's a challenge. So how do you bring your relevance to the table? You access critical partnership and also build on partners and also have greater coordination and partnership with others and leveraging on each other's comparative advantage. So I think maybe briefly, so those are some of the challenges that we see and also ways to go around it.
Great, thank you very much, Dr. Roba, for sharing these very important indeed challenges that think tanks might want to turn their attention to in the near future. I'm going to now move to Ambassador Mohamed Relishki to share your thoughts first, and then Mrs. Jessica Diallo will sort of provide her closing remarks to the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Selma. Well, first of all, I will join my colleague Roba, for emphasizing not only the human, but also the financial resources. And I think these are permanent concerns of think tanks. It's and this problem is more acute when it comes to times of crisis. And we all, I think, witnessed these problems. I would list very quickly so that we can move to question and answers. The second one, like for me to be, would be the access to qualitative information necessary for an up-to-date and fact-based analysis and projections of actions to be taken. The third one is the fact that think tanks operate in an information-flooded society when fact-based analysis are often overshadowed by disruptive forces of the social media. The third one, I think, is, or the fourth one, is a rather, I would say, cultural problems. I think in some of countries of the South, decision makers consider that they know it all or they know better. So that the input of think tanks might not be accurate, might not be useful, etc. And I think you really have to struggle in order to find a place and in order to be heard. I would say that this feeling is due maybe to the fact that the government is under the pressure to look for quick fixes when it is faced by a crisis. And so one of the other challenges is to adapt to the new ways of working, to the new ways of communicating, to the new ways of reaching out through more and more sophisticated technology. Last but not least, I think that the challenge in these circumstances where you have very scarce resources that will be primarily devoted to the needs of the population rather than investing in research and in think tanks, would pose the problem of, for the think tanks to continue to be neutral while looking for funding, to continue to be seen as independent while asking for money from different stakeholders. But all in all, I would like to conclude by saying that despite these challenges, despite these obstacles, despite these difficulties, this crisis, I think, proved to be a very good opportunity for the think tanks to make their voice heard, to demonstrate their usefulness and the value added that they can bring, and above all, to gain the trust, I think, of the main stakeholders. I would stop at that.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for sharing these thoughts. And it's very important. And I think that this sort of contributes to really building a greater conversation surrounding the role and challenges that think tanks might face. Mrs. Jessica Dialga, the floor is all yours to provide your own thoughts as well on the issue. Thank you.
Thank you. So, I'm starting with saying that while the policy process in the US heavily relies on the work of think tanks, which are considered not only legitimate, but also fundamental to the debate, well, the same cannot be said for many other societies. So in the Mexican case today, for example, the government itself and the social forces it commands actively attempt to delegitimize well-established professional think tanks in order to advance agendas that do not fulfill even the most basic cost-benefit analysis. So more worrisome, it also intimidates funders. So in recent years, there have been several questioning of technical knowledge from the mouth of politicians and public officials around the world. So in Mexico, not long ago, elected officials told us that it doesn't take much science to govern. So we think tanks with our studies, data, and methodologies have become demoted to invited guests, as Ambassador was saying. Sometimes uncomfortable ones to discuss about public policy. Now, the coronavirus pandemic has changed that landscape because science expert knowledge and evidence-based decisions have returned to the rightful place in government decisions. And the world admires countries that, with science as its shield, have managed to contain the impact of the wave of the virus and questions leaders who, ignoring the specialists, believe more in the political instinct than in hard evidence. So think tanks matter because we address topics and issues in an independent, nonpartisan way that would otherwise be ignored, forgotten, or left aside by both the public and private sectors. So in this context, we think tanks have no choice, also especially in the Global South, but to keep promoting the values of our work with every possible stakeholder. Gaining broader exposure becomes instrumental to getting greater attention. So we have to reconcile independence and the interest of funders, thus becomes a major challenge. Now, we also matter because our efforts help to find alternatives, policy proposals, and durable solutions while government deal with day-to-day questions of governance. And the main challenge for us in the years to come will be to keep as safe havens for reflection and discussion shielded from political whims. In Mexico today, this becomes even more troublesome for this government that is attempting to eliminate or neutralize each and every source of independence or counterweight. So it's very, we're in a very difficult position. And well, challenges will come in different areas, and if we mean to prevail, we must reach out to average citizen and build general support. And we must do this in a strategic way by translating such needs to the policymakers on one hand and effectively communicating best practices and innovative policies to the general public on the other. So this is why think tanks are very relevant. And we, as my colleagues were stating, we need to be relevant, we need to be quick, but we also need to be ethical in our discussions, and we need to be nonpartisan and independent as much as we can. So the funding is very relevant. The funding is crucial for our activities, but we cannot just submit ourselves for different interests, but that are others, that the interest of our citizens, our country, our region, the whole world.
Thank you very much for these sort of concluding remarks to this first structured discussion throughout this webinar. We have a couple of questions that the audience has asked, and I think that they sort of both go hand in hand. So the first one is with regards to how can we more effectively get policy recommendations from think tanks implemented by policymakers. So how can think tanks leverage their capacity to effectively influence policy making? And the second one sort of really focuses on the Global South. So how can think tanks in the Global South incite decision makers to interact with them? So I think I'm gonna first of all give the floor to Ambassador Mohamed Lulishki to get us started on these two very important questions. And then Mrs. Jessica Dialba, you can also feel free to jump in and answer any of the two questions while we sort of try to get hold of Dr. Roga again. Thank you. Dr. Lulishki, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Salma. On this issue, how the think tanks from the Global South can influence, I think that Jessica was right when she drew a line between the importance of think tanks in the North, if I may just call it that way, and in the global South. In the North, there is a tradition, there is a history, and there are institutions and rules that help the think tanks emerge. And there is a culture of seeking and accepting other ideas, other proposals, and inputs from outside the realm of politics. There is this conviction in the United States, in other countries from the North. In the global South, think tanks are not as or very young institutions, and the environment in the global South have an impact not only on their I would say on their survival, because it's not only a matter of funding, it's not a matter of human resources. It's also the whole environment in which you are conducting your activities, which is conducive or non-conducive of being productive, of being independent, and from being heard by the decision maker. I think in our developing countries, we are still in the stage of ensuring that think tanks would fit in the whole spectrum of different actors. I think about 2 weeks ago, we all took knowledge of this letter that was sent by President Biden to, I think, to Harvard or to Columbia University, asking them that, like in the New Deal for the United States, we managed to do so many things. And I'm asking you as think tanks to provide for new ideas. I think this is maybe the ideals that one could think and dream of in our developing countries, to see that not only think tanks are going towards decision makers to solicit them and to try to offer them their views, their perceptions, their ideas, and their alternative proposals, but you have quite the opposite. It's the statesmen, it's the political parties, it's the private sector who is trying maybe this kind of marketing themselves with think tanks so that they can provide them with new ideas. They can provide them with new horizon, new dimensions of how to act and how to react. We are in the process of building think tanks, creating the conditions for their survival, for their being viable, for them being productive. And I think we are on the right path, but there is a lot to do so that think tanks in our countries could really be seen and gain the confidence and the trust of decision makers, so that they can be seen as sources of proposals, sources of healthy debate, and useful in terms of bridging the public opinion, the academia with the decision maker.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for sharing your thoughts. Unfortunately, I have to inform you all that Dr. Roba has had troubles relogging to the session, and he presents his apologies for not being able to attend the end of this session. And we also truly apologize about that. So I will move then to you, Mrs. Jessica Dialba, to sort of also touch upon some of the ways in which think tanks in the Global South particularly could participate a bit more to governance processes and to policymaking?
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, I would say that it's just one clear strategy, which is communication, communication, and communication. So we keep on have to push to communicate those policies that we think are going to be able to solve all many of the problems that we have in our societies, especially in the global south, because we have many of them. Talking about for instance, sustainable development goals related to the pandemic, I'm just going to be very quick at stating, for instance, number one, no poverty. The number of people living under the poverty line has increased in many countries due to COVID-19, and millions will be pushed back into extreme poverty. This is one thing that is that is happening in the global south, Mexico and other countries. Now, the second, in zero hunger, COVID-19 pandemic has impacted agriculture, supply chains, and work, and it has put the issue of food security at the top of the global policy agenda. This is something that we need to address. In number three, more testing and better access to healthcare are critical to curbing the impact of the virus. And here, for instance, in Mexico, we don't test people. We don't have access for healthcare for everybody. So this is a huge crisis. Number four, a very important, quality education. Disparities in access to technology have deepened inequalities in attaining education. So this is also a very crucial issue that we need to address. Also, gender equality. The pandemic has exposed the already existing gender gaps in society because women are experiencing a greater economic burden and domestic violence has skyrocketed. And then I could just continue over and over to the other sustainable development goals and showing how they have deeply affected in the global south community. So we as think tanks need to just keep on pushing a strategic agenda of communication to make leaders understand that we are important for collaborating and to move on to go out of this crisis altogether.
Great. Thank you very much for your contribution. To wrap up and perhaps conclude and building on those great policy recommendations that both of you have shared with us and Dr. Roba in the first half of the webinar, I would like to give you both 1 minute each to sort of summarize very briefly perhaps your vision for the future of think tanks. Especially focusing perhaps on the global south and providing a grounded and regional perspective. Mrs. Jessica de Alba, I'll give you first the floor, and then we can move and listen to Ambassador Rulishki's concluding remarks.
Thank you. Just to summarize, well, we have many challenges coming ahead. The crisis is not over. It's going to be us for years to come, especially because there is a crisis not only in the health sector, but also a crisis in society. And it's going to be a very deep economic crisis for the years to come. So we have to be very strategic on how we act. We have to communicate very assertively what we can do. And we also have to partner with other think tanks in order to be more productive on attaining the goals that we have set upon to solve this or to help people to go through this crisis. In the global south, we need to many partnerships. We need to be very strategic on what we set as goals and perhaps help people manage the crisis in better ways that we could do acting lonely. So this is all strategic thinking, partnerships, and just keeping in mind that this is going to be for the long run, and we have to be very creative and innovative in the solutions that we propose, always pushing for leaders to listen to our ideas. And changes are going not just to come from the up to the bottom, but to the bottom up.
Absolutely, great insights to truly build the ground for further conversation on the future of think tanks and sort of the need to truly focus on innovation as a critical means of doing that. Ambassador Lulishki, the floor is also yours to sort of share your vision with us.
Thank you, Salma. I think that this crisis offered the think tanks to advance some concepts and some avenues of action. The first one, we have never talked about safety net with the same intensity that during this COVID-19 crisis. Secondly, we have never talked about universal revenue, this amount of money that has to be systematically and on regular basis to be given to those in need in our societies, those who are on the margin of poverty. Three, the issue of environment. I think everybody was extremely and positively surprised when we knew that the temperature has been reduced because we didn't have the same intense industrial activities and commerce and trade, that the environment was better off since March 2020. And I think this raised more the awareness of civil societies, of NGOs, of think tanks, that there is something that has been proven thanks to this this crisis. And I would add also to my voice to what Jessica said about the situation of women, the issue of education, the violence, etc., etc. What to do? I think, first of all, we have to have faith. We have to have faith in the mission of think tanks. They are necessary because they are conveying the voice of the voiceless in our civil societies. And I think this value is extremely precious, and we have to preserve it and we have to nourish it. We have to continue to prove that we are useful, if not valuable. And we have to continue to knock at the door of the decision makers. And I think the door has been a little bit open during this crisis. So let's try to put our foot in this very small opening and try to enlarge it as quickly as far as possible, by maintaining the contact, by trying to be more persuasive that the aim and the objective of the think tank is not to be an intruder in politics, but to be useful to politicians, to be useful to the decision makers, to offer alternative. It's up to them to take them or to let them down, but it is something at least to think of and to agree that we have some alternative that we have to look at before taking the final decisions. So optimistic, yes, I would say reasonably optimistic during this time of crisis, but I think crisis, as far as think tanks are concerned, equals a very golden opportunity to prove themselves and to develop their activity and their mission, because it is a very useful, it is a social mission, it is an intellectual mission, and I think it is a healthy mission of think tanks within any system.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for reminding us of the prime importance, really, of think tanks in drawing attention to issues that are not always put under the spotlight, as well as the need to maintain faith in the mission of these institutions. So I would like to really thank our panelists, as well as the audience, for participating to this critical conversation. Thank you for your very rich insights and sharp analysis on the role of think tanks in times of crisis, which touched on key recommendations for enhancing collective capacity to respond to overlapping crises, especially in the Global South, and especially at a time during which such collective intelligence has proved to be necessary to revive public debates, public confidence, and help implement sound and tangible policy recommendations. I would like to again thank our audience for their attention, participation, and questions, and many thanks to all for attending our session.